Welcome to Litigating Literacy, a new podcast to discuss the literacy issues impacting our children in society until all kids can read. My name is Diane Dragan, and my co host is.
I'm Nick Dragan, husband and follower of Diane Dragan in the journey to ensure that all kids can read. So you grew up in Columbus, Nebraska. Why was education so important to you?
I don't remember personally learning to read. I always read. I read before I went to kindergarten. I read, going into kindergarten. And reading, especially in a town like Columbus, Nebraska, is an escape. It is your way to see the world when you are stuck in a small town surrounded by cornfields. So I read every day, all day. And that was my way of getting to know the world, my way of getting out of Nebraska. And school just always came really easy for me. School was never hard. It was never a challenge. It was never anything I had to work at. But I always saw it as my way out. I knew the only way I was getting out of Nebraska was to get an education, and to do well enough in school, I would get a scholarship so that I controlled my own destiny and where I went. So it was always important.
Okay, so I'm going to pump your tires a little bit because you never pump your tires, but you did get a scholarship going to University of Nebraska, and were you not the valedictorian in high school?
Yes, I was the valedictorian in high school. I got a full scholarship to University of Nebraska, which, like everything else education-wise, then I exploited, because then a full scholarship was take however many credits you want. They were just all paid for. So I got a double major in 4 years. Most of the time I was taking 18. I took as many as 21 credit hours a semester, because by then I knew I wanted to go to law school. So again, it was get as much education as I can and do as well at it, because that was my next step, my next way out.
So then you went to law school. Where'd you go to law school, and how did you end up there?
I went to Pepperdine, which is in Malibu, California. I had never heard of Pepperdine from Nebraska until they sent me a postcard in the dead of winter, with a picture of the campus, which, if you don't know the Pepperdine campus, it's between the Pacific Ocean and the mountains overlooking on a cliff. And I thought,
Baywatch University.
Baywatch University. And I thought, wait a second, I can go there with a scholarship and be a lawyer. So, yeah, me and my crappy white Ford packed up and drove to Cal. I'd never even seen an ocean before I went to law school.
So you went out there, go to law school. You did well at law school. Pump your tires again. You graduated seventh out of how many?
200 some.
Okay. So you've always been very successful. And earlier you mentioned it came easy to you. But now, in your situation, you're dealing with 3 kids, 3 of the 5, that education doesn't come easy to them. How does that make you feel?
It was really eye-opening. Our first 2 read early, did well. School came easy to them, and then the third one came along. I'll never forget it. They all had the same preschool teacher, and when it got to the third one, and he went to that preschool teacher, and already I was like, something's off. And she said, "You're not being fair. Your other 2 kids are gifted. This is an average kid. This is what an average kid looks like. Give him grace, give him time. He'll get there." And then I felt like the idiot. Like, oh, I'm setting unfair, unreal expectations on our kid. I'll just sit back. And although you didn't really ask this, that really set back my journey in helping him, because I thought I was the problem. I thought my expectations were too high. I thought that the educator telling me this is what it looks like knew what it looks like. And that really set us back, I think.
When you think about the 3 kids, because when I think about stuff and what you just said there of the expectations, when our kids, all of our kids, eventually got tested by a neuropsych because of what you pushed for and your understanding of what was important, we learned a lot about our kids, and I felt terrible about how I parented Samantha or parented Nathan, our oldest son. And that kind of thing sets you off on a journey. And can you kind of describe that process of how you got there and why testing a child was so important?
I think everybody thinks that they're average. You know, whatever your background is, whatever your whatever, you just think that this is how it is for everyone. You know, and we had our kids, I thought this is just a kid. Like, I'd not raised any kids before. We had them. And then you see testing and you're like, oh, okay, this isn't average. This is exceptional for, you know, IQ and other things. This kid needs parented differently. And it really gives you some perspective on what expectations you should have, what that child is capable of. And I mean, to some extent, it puts a huge weight on you as a parent, knowing that you have this kid with all this potential and it's your job not to mess it up. And I think that I was often worried about, am I messing it up? Am I setting too high standards? Am I setting too low standards? You know, am I pushing too hard? Should we be pushing more? Like, I mean, parenting, it's tough with any kid. And then you have kids that are twice exceptional, they are gifted, and they have some struggles. It's just a whole nother mix.
Yeah, and I really felt that way with regard to Nathan when, you know, the test came back and it's like, hey, this kid's really smart. Like, his IQ is above 140. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I kept on pushing back on that. And I was like, no, that can't be. You know, you know, they're not that smart. I'm not that smart, you know, but.
I mean, clearly that came from my genetics.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I also had a bad experience when I was younger and when I was tested. And I think you know that. And I've talked about that before. Of being someone that was identified as gifted, but then nobody knowing what the heck to do with me. And then I was isolated and sent off. And I didn't want that for our kids. But when we're talking about the journey here and why you're doing what you're doing, when you got out of law school, you started criminal defense work. Actually, you started in the prosecutor's office, if I remember correctly, as an intern. Why did you end up being a criminal defense attorney? Why was that so important to you?
I mean, there was a professor at Pepperdine that taught criminal law, and he was a bit of an anomaly on that campus. And one of the things that he had us do was volunteer at a maximum security juvenile detention center, just outside of this beautiful Malibu. It's in Topanga Canyon. Mm-hmm. So hidden in this gorgeous landscape, weave back in a little bit, and there's a maximum security juvenile detention center in there. And so we would go there in the evenings, and our job was to help kind of mentor these kids, work with them on homework, etc. And you're dealing with a room full of primarily 14, 15, 16-year-old boys. Some already have face tattoos. They're involved in gangs. And these kids, they can't read. They can't write. They can't do basic math. Like, part of me is thinking these are high school kids. You know, I'm going to come in and we're going to work on algebra and we're going to be reading novels. These kids couldn't write their name in some of these cases. And you know, they already have kids. Some of these 15-year-olds already had kids, and they're in this facility and they have no access to education. And it's not just because they're in custody that day. Clearly they're 15. They'd been in a school, but no one had taught them basic skills.
Were they in prison primarily because of literacy issues, or how do you equate or give weight to that with regard to the prison population?
I mean,
in your experience,
nobody goes to prison directly because of an educational issue. But if you're being realistic, if you do not teach an individual to read, you don't teach them to write, you don't teach them to spell, you don't teach them basic math, what are their job opportunities when they get into a community? I mean,
probably not a whole lot.
You can't even fill out an application.
I mean, if you can't do basic math, can you give change at a McDonald's?
No. No. And, you can't read to find out and here's the other thing that a lot of people don't understand. You and I had role models. They may not have always been the best, but,
Sure.
we had parents, we had other people that had jobs. Some of these kids come from families where there's no role model with employment, like legitimate employment. And so you put them in a community where there's no role models, and you put them in a community where they don't have a way out, like I did with education. Education was always my way out. If you don't give them that, their way out is criminal. Their way out is dealing drugs. Their way out is stealing. Their way out is, to take, because nobody's given them anything.
So, you spoke about, reading was your way out. So what I'm hearing you say is that without the reading, there is no vision. You can't imagine a life outside of the community parameters that you're in. And if your role models are gangs and crime and dysfunction, that's where you're going to end up. Is that accurate?
I mean, maybe this oversimplifies it, but like as a kid, one of the gifts that I got each like birthday and Christmas from my one grandma was she would give me one in the series of the Little House on the Prairie books.
Yeah.
So I would get one, I would read it, then I would get the next one, and so that exposes me to historical perspective. It exposes me to farming and all of that and that kind of lifestyle. At the same time, in high school, I come across Helter Skelter, Charles Manson book. That exposes me to a whole different lifestyle, and in between there's, Stephen King and V.C. Andrews, the Flowers in the Attic, taboo kind of reading. But every book you read exposes you to another option in life, good or bad. It exposes you to another option in life. But if you can't read, your life is only what either you're seeing on TV or what is already in your community. You don't have insight into those other people. I mean, there's a saying that books are my best friend. You become bonded, like people do today, to a series, whether you're watching Tony Soprano or whatever.
Sure.
When we were kids, you bonded to characters through books. And those people became people you could relate to or people you hated or whatever. If you don't have literacy, your world is very, very small.
Who was your role model in books? Did you have one? Probably had multiple.
I mean, I don't know that I had a role model in books, but I always wanted to learn about someone else. I always wanted to learn about the next person, whether it was, the classics like Little Women or, the Little House on the Prairie, or it was literally reading things like Helter Skelter with Charles Manson and that whole screwed up world. Like I always wanted to learn about someone else, someone else's thoughts, someone else's perspective. And if you can't read, you can't do that.
So you primarily functioned as a criminal defense attorney for the better part of 20 years since you got out of law school in 1997 to, well, heck, even further than that, to 2020. 20 plus years as a criminal defense attorney, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
1997 to...
So one of the things that when friends of mine would ask me, like, oh, what's your wife do for a living? Oh, she's a federal public defender. Oh, she helps criminals stay out of jail. And this is me, and I want you to speak to this, but early on, I always thought kind of the same thing. But then the reality hit that you're a champion of rights in the United States. You're the one that is upholding the Constitution in defense of an individual, which is a primary defense against a totalitarian regime, is the way I look at it. So you've always championed individual rights. And I want you to kind of speak on that and where that's brought you to today and what you're starting to do and where your change was in doing full-time what you're doing right now as an education attorney.
I mean, I did start at the DA's office in LA as a law student, and I became very quickly disillusioned with somewhat government work and that whole process. This will date me a little bit, but I was working in the LA DA's office during the OJ trial. I had nothing to do with that train wreck, but I was there. So I had the ability to see what was going on and how poorly that was being prosecuted. And just the lack of effort that many people in that office were putting in because it was assumed they were always going to win. Everybody was going to get convicted. Like if you get charged, you're getting convicted. So they didn't really have to try.
Yeah, you weren't arrested for no reason.
Correct. You were not arrested for no reason. If a police officer came and said they saw you do it or you did it or someone else,
Yeah, you're guilty.
You're guilty, you're convicted.
Yeah. This whole innocent before you're guilty is
No. Yeah.
fallacy.
So there was no challenge in it.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from law school, I had an offer to go to Las Vegas and work with a criminal defense attorney while I waited for my bar exam.
Okay.
And I went there, and you got to work, and you got to be creative, and you got to be on your feet to do criminal defense because everything is stacked against you. So that was where my passion really came in. Like, okay, this is underdog work. This is, you're really fighting.
Was it the challenge or was it the underdog? You're fighting for the underdog. What was the primary motivator for you?
I mean, criminal defense is more fun. Let's just put it that way, because you are the underdog. You are fighting. You are looking for the way out, to get out from under whatever the allegation is. You're looking to prove that they're lying. You're looking to find the aha moment of why they're wrong, and do that.
Or you're also making sure that the government, which has all the money and all the power, are following the rules set forth in the Constitution. Because that's an extremely important part. Because the moment that we allow that to go sideways, we all are at risk. Did you feel that way too?
I mean, there's always a fear of overstepping of the government. I'll give you a simple example. Like, young Diane hears a story about, oh, the cops fleeced me and they took all the money in my pocket before they arrested me. You hear that once or twice. You're like, come on, buddy. And then you hear it dozens and dozens of times. You're like, oh.
It might be happening.
Yeah, I think it might be happening, And then ultimately, I had clients cooperate against police officers who were caught fleecing them and taking all their money. So you get this perspective that the police aren't always right. The government isn't always working in our global sense best interest. And sometimes prosecutors want to win at all costs. And once that clicks, then the fight is on. Like every case you're looking for the corruption, every case you're looking for, them overstepping the bounds, etc.
I want to remember that too, because there's a high correlation to what you're doing right now as to the government is always perceived as we're going to do the best for the citizenry and we're going to make sure the health and welfare, hell, it's even in the Constitution, in the preamble, the health and welfare of the American people. But there seems to be a fallacy with that. And I want to come back to that. Not now, but I do want to remember that and come back to that because we see that in our education system today. So you represented for 20 plus years death penalty cases, hardcore criminals, some innocent people. Okay? But you find out your kids have dyslexia, and now your focus is on something different. You're still working full time. Can you speak to when you first found out that your third child had a learning disability?
It's a slow, gradual process to figure out something is off about your kid. And like I said, I was already slowed down by a teacher telling me I had too high of expectations. But slowly you could see, we sent Nicholas as a kindergartner big smile, tons of love. Everybody loves Nicholas. And we send that boy into our public school. And within a year and a half, that boy is coming home defeated. He's coming home in tears. He's coming home crying. He's coming home calling himself stupid, dumb. You're asking him to get out his, one-page math homework, and he's ripping it up and throwing it at you. He's breaking pencils. He is a different kid than the one we sent to school. And that was a slow realization that maybe it's something at school. And it's not just, oh, he's getting defiant, he's not, whatever. And then when, we got the first set of testing, and I can still remember sitting in the psychologist's office, sitting on her couch. We brought him there because we thought there was an issue, but when she looked at me and said, your baby can't read, every fiber of my being wanted to say, you're wrong. You're wrong. I've seen him. He can read. Stop saying that. But in my heart, I knew. I mean, he was a kid who would hold one of those stupid picture books and say, watch, Mom, I'm going to tell you what's on the next page. And he would read it to you and then turn the page because he had memorized the books, not because he knew the words.
Yeah. In reading to Nicholas, there was always those times, because we read with all the kids. And with him, it was, we'd read the page, like, read this page, you go next. And then we'd do the same books. Good Night Moon or whatever the case is. And I'd be like, we just read this. How do you not know this word? It's the same word that we just read on the previous page, but because he hadn't memorized it yet. And that never clicked with me. And that never clicked with you that, hey, there's a problem here. And that's what I remember. When you tell that story, I remember him just being frustrated with him. Like, buddy, it's moon. It's the same word that we just had over here, but he hadn't memorized it yet.
Well, and I think you come up with all the other excuses first. It's his attention. He's not paying attention. He wasn't looking. You make excuses because you don't want to see a problem.
Right.
But once we got that diagnosis, and I was like, okay, once it sunk in and I accepted, okay, we have a kid with a learning disability, then it was great. I just need to tell the school and we're all going to get on the same page. And these people, I mean, why do you send your kid to school? You send them to learn to read. You send them to get educated.
Yes.
So when I learned...
They're going to do what's in the best interest of the child.
Correct. So ignorant initial Diane just thought, I share this information with them and these experts are going to come in and they're going to rally around my son and everything's going to be okay.
Correct.
Now, mind you, I will, in fairness, say that the psychologist told me that was a delusional belief from the get-go.
I believed it because one of the first meetings, you were asking questions and I was helping defend the school system. I was like, no, let's give them a chance to work this. You remember that in the beginning?
Yeah, we picked a good district.
We
did
our research. That was a reason. I think it's worthwhile to even say that. Like you said, we were in Las Vegas, or you went to Las Vegas. We met in Las Vegas. We decided to leave Las Vegas. What was one of the primary reasons we decided to leave Las Vegas?
The education system in Nevada, which fought for 50th place with, I think it was Mississippi every year.
At the time.
And of course...
The billboards.
The billboards. One cannot explain away what is on the billboards.
There was one that I was like, I don't know how I'm going to explain that billboard. Yeah, it was quite direct.
But the whole point
was the education.
Education was why we left Las Vegas, to find a better place to bring our kids up where they would get a high-quality education.
And the fact the culture in Las Vegas is such that education is not important in Las Vegas. I went to University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I went to school with individuals that were valet parkers, that were dealers, that were cocktail waitresses, and they were going and getting an education. And I remember one distinctly. I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I'm like, hey, how did your interview with the Mirage go? He goes, they offered me a job as a financial analyst at the Mirage, which at the time in the early 90s, it was like, how much do they offer you? Oh, like start out at like $36,000 a year, which was good money in Vegas. And I go, that's fantastic. When do you start? He goes, I'm not taking it. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm making $60,000 a year in cash parking cars
Yeah.
and not paying any taxes. Why would I take that job? And so there was this culture of education wasn't that important, and that wasn't our value set. We viewed you got to where you were because of education. Eventually, I got to where I was because of education. So, our journeys were radically different. But I think that was a primary thing. So not to derail it, but to kind of give a baseline of why we got here to St. Louis and we did our research, and why we ended up in the school district that we did is because of all the inordinate amount of research that this school district's one of the best in the state. It's one of the top 5 at the time. It was one of the top 5% in the country. And go on and tell us what happened then.
So, we were there for an event at school. I don't even think it was formal parent-teacher conferences, whatever. And I encounter Nicholas's first grade teacher in the hallway. This is the end of the school year. We're talking like April, May, end of the school year. And I say, hey, we just got this diagnosis. Nicholas is dyslexic. And she paused and she goes, let me think if he was one of the criers. And I literally like tilted my head and I was like, what is that? What does that even mean? But I let her think, and she goes, yeah, he was. And I go, what's a crier? And she goes, well, those are the kids when they come to first grade, they lay their head down on the desk and cry. And I was
How did that make you feel?
I was baffled because for part of me, again, I was in this like denial, and I was like, well, wait, why am I just learning this now, is what I said to her. Like, why are you just telling me this now? And she goes, there's no point. There's nothing you could do. If they don't stop crying after the first month or so, then we get the parents involved. And the feeling of just sickness and disgust and...
Were you angered by that?
I think I was still stunned, because I'm just picturing my little boy with his head on a desk in first grade, sobbing. And the teacher's approach was to ignore it to see if it stopped. And not tell me and not tell him. Imagine if she had told me in the first week of kindergarten or the first week of first grade, your kid's crying every day. You don't think I would have said, well, why? What? And jumped on that. But instead, it was just her experience that some kids are just going to cry every day and it's not worth telling parents.
Did you feel helpless at that moment?
I mean, I think that was the start of the anger and the disillusionment with the school. And
so an anger as a mother of like, how could you do this to my child? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And just how, it wasn't even how could you do it to my child? It was how can an educator have that opinion? Okay. It was bigger than just my child, because she said the criers, plural, meaning Nicholas wasn't the only one in that classroom with his head down crying. Nicholas was my kid with his head down crying, but she just accepted that a bunch of kids are going to come into first grade and lay their head down and cry for weeks.
Did you think at that point there's a bigger systematic problem here? Or are you just like, you're still in the fog? Because for me, I didn't process this anywhere near, and if not for you, our kids are a train wreck when it comes to learning. And I want to make that abundantly clear, that what you have done has been nothing short of phenomenal. And I don't think I could have ever gotten to where you were, because all that it does to me when I think back, when you first told me this, I think I was really pissed off.
I mean, pissed off is often your reaction to
Yes.
things. So I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, I think, and I regret this thought now, but I mean, half of parenting is regretting your decisions, regretting your thoughts, regretting your actions. When she said that to me, in my head, my immediate thought was, he's out of here. It wasn't about the other kids. It wasn't about the school. It was like, you know what? We're pulling him and we're getting him the help he needs, because if this is the attitude in this school, my kid's not spending another day here.
Yeah.
And so I almost instantaneously made the decision to go with the psychologist's recommendation of putting him in Churchill.
And also, you and I had the discussion, and you and I always feel obligated from the standpoint of, hey, this is our problem. So we'll own our problem. This is our child. We'll own it. We're not going to put it upon the state or the government or the school or anybody else. We'll figure it out, because it's the way you and I are.
Yes.
Okay? And so, I remember that discussion saying, this is going to be difficult, and pushing back to you hard on it. And we had a long-term discussion on it. The thing that I remember most was a fellow colleague of yours had said, well, if you don't pay for it now, you're going to pay for it later. That was the piece that probably was the tipping point for me of like, yeah, that makes the most sense. You've got to make the investment now. Otherwise, you're going to be making some huge investment later, which could be a lot worse.
Well, and I think you got to put it in perspective. Churchill at the time was over $30,000 for second grade.
Yeah, which
that
is
was
a massive number.
That was more than my entire student loan debt through law school because of scholarships and other things. So we were talking of paying more than I paid for law school to send our child to second grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's not like, oh, we're going to cut down our Starbucks habit. Like, it's $30,000 for second grade, and the prediction is he needs to be there for 3 years.
Yeah.
So we're looking at $100,000 tab to get our kid reading. And at that time, we got 2 more. And I mean, there was a huge part of me, and you might not remember this until I bring it up. I think you will. There was part of me that was like, do I quit my job at homeschool?
We did have that discussion.
And I was like, I can do it better than they're doing it for him. Like, I can do this. And we've got these little kids and childcare and everything. Do I quit? And at the time you were like, not happening. No way. Homeschool is, for crazy religious zealots or whatever. But there was part of me that not only wanted to fix the problem, I wanted to fix it myself. Because I felt that putting my kid in that situation was a parenting mistake, and I owed him safety and security in a way that the school hadn't given it to him.
When did you first start the books and reading the science of reading or the science of literacy? When did you first start that? Was that after Nicholas was in Churchill? Because you've went on a journey. You actually got Wilson certified as a tutor. You went on that whole thing, but I know that was later. But I remember you're a voracious reader. You've said that. But also part of your job as a criminal defense attorney at the time was to understand what your clients did and can you speak about that and then how that led you into reading about the science of reading, dyslexia, and all that, and when you got started in that?
I mean, initially when we sent Nicholas to Churchill in second grade, there was part of me that was like, okay, I don't need to worry about it. He's at this other school. They're going to teach him to read. And I could wash my hands of the public school. The other ones weren't going to school for a little bit yet. The older ones were doing perfectly fine. And so I was kind of in a lull for probably the first year that Nicholas was in Churchill. And I mean, they do these things called a demystification conference where you go in and they explain, hey, here's how my brain learns and all of that.
That whole parent, that was like a 2-hour thing. And we're like, wow, okay.
Yeah. So I think when I started to be like, oh, holy hell, we're not done, was when I started seeing the signs in Damien and Kate.
Yeah.
When, they weren't even approaching the alphabet. They weren't singing the alphabet song. They couldn't rhyme. They had speech errors in, the way, and I was just like, oh, wait a second. And then I start doing some research about how it's hereditary. And I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but once we told our families about Nicholas and he's got dyslexia, that's when I really learned my dad's story. And, dyslexia has a hereditary component.
What is his story?
I mean, I didn't learn it until much later during this time. When he was in fourth grade, grew up in South Dakota, literally a one-room schoolhouse. No electricity.
Grew up on a farm.
Grew up in a farm, no electricity, no running water inside till he's like 12. And he's got a twin brother. The two twins are the youngest of 5 boys. He couldn't read or write his own name in fourth grade. And so, I mean, the story he tells, which he kind of jokes, but I mean, it had to hurt, was when he couldn't do that in fourth grade, they decided to hold him back. His twin brother was the only other one in the class, so they both got held back. And so he's in this one-room school struggling. One of his older brothers never learned to read. Never. Left school like 6th grade and, went into the farming community. He did well by himself because at that point in time, there were careers you could do that didn't require a high literacy rate. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, my father found someone who helped him learn to read. He made it through high school. He went to college and he went to dental school. And I mean, he was a dentist for 50 years. But part of the reason he was able to choose that is a lot of the exams back then were oral. And he had a great memory and he had people that would take notes for him. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he's just a great guy. People liked him. So he's the kind of person you want to help. So he was able to make it through that journey, but it was always hard for him. I mean, he fought for it. But when Nicholas came out is when he started sharing his story with me. The story about his brother not learning to read, about the struggles of literacy. And even in his 70s and 80s, when he talks about it, you can see him welling up with tears.
Yeah.
And that, I was like, that's not happening to my kids. And then realizing it's hereditary, starting to look at Damien and Kate and seeing it was coming, that's when I had no choice but to dive in, because a $30,000 investment for one kid, it hurt. But it was absolutely
impossible.
Beyond the scope of possibility that we were going to send 3 kids to a dyslexia specialist school.
So you start reading, and how many books have you read on the subject of reading and dyslexia? And I mean, this is just a microcosm here behind us.
From the time I started to today, thousands and thousands of hours.
Yes.
And I didn't just read. Like, I would find somebody who wrote a book, like Mark Seidenberg, and then I would find a way to talk to him, and I would get more knowledge and more information from him. There was David Kilpatrick, who wrote a book on phonemic awareness. We invited him to St. Louis to do a conference, took him to dinner, and grilled him. Like, reading wasn't enough for me. I wanted to talk to the people that knew the research so that I could learn more. But I mean, thousands and thousands of hours.
How did that affect you as a mother and as a wife? How did that affect your life?
Anytime you spend thousands of hours on something, it's thousands of hours you're not spending on something else. So it's thousands of hours that I'm not spending as a wife, as a mom. We would go take the kids for a hike. I'd bring a book and I'd sit down and I'd be reading while they're playing around. I would bring a book to the playground. I would bring a book to hockey. I always had something with me that I was working on. And so, it's distracting. It takes away from your parenting when you're trying to figure out how to educate your kid. I didn't want to be the educator. I wanted to be the parent, but I didn't have a choice.
When you say you didn't have a choice, why didn't you have a choice? Because you could have just pushed it off.
Our kids were never going to be literate if I didn't make the school make them literate.
Okay.
I don't know how else to say it. The school...
So at this point in time, you have zero confidence in the school. Or little confidence. Maybe zero is a little extreme.
The irony is, you know me, I'm not particularly an optimist. But I truly thought if I did the research and I brought the research to the school, things would change. And so I brought some information together. I showed up at a school board meeting, which I had never been to a school board before. This is back November 2017. And I have a little 3-minute presentation on dyslexia and what our kids need. And I literally think I'm just going to tell the school board, and then maybe, it's going to trickle down and the kids are going to get the benefit. No. The school board was absolutely not receptive to the idea that the school was not teaching certain kids to read. And then I got involved. A law had passed in 2016 saying that schools were going to have to start screening all kids with dyslexia in 2018. So I start meeting internally with a bunch of administrators in the district who are planning for the screening. And at first, they're very receptive. They're willing to have parent input. I'm explaining some screeners. I've done some research. I'm making some suggestions. They're putting together a dyslexia handbook. I'm helping edit it. Like, there is some camaraderie between myself and the district as we're doing this. And then I remember a conversation where I said, you understand when you give this screener, more than 40% of the kids in this district are going to fail. And they looked at me like I had two heads, and I go, you're teaching Lucy Calkins. You're teaching balanced literacy. All of the research says at least 40% of kids don't learn to read that way. So when you screen them, 40% of your kids are going to fail this screener. And they literally thought I was just full of it and that wasn't going to happen. Well, now comes 2018, and they screen the kids and they hide the results. And
Because
I'm like,
why?
Well, I'm like, where are the results? And their response was, the law just said we had to screen them, not that we had to share the results.
Were the results 40% failed?
44%, I think it was 44% failure. And would you like to know how I know that?
How do you know that?
I had to pay a sunshine request to our school district.
Freedom of Information Act?
Freedom of Information Act, which is not free.
No,
cost
it
us
isn't.
more than $100, maybe $200, for them to turn over the screening results to me, which then I made into pie charts and graphs to show how many kids failed. And I took to the school board and I presented to them that more than 40% of the kids failed the reading screen.
So at this point now, let's bring up what I said I was going to bring up earlier about government looking out for the best interests of the citizens and the schools looking out for the best interests of the kids. Now here you've uncovered what you uncovered in the criminal defense of, hey, there might be some bad cops. There might be some bad players in the government that don't always do things the way they should be done. Now you're starting to uncover this onion, unpeel this onion, so to speak, in the school. What is going through your mind at this point?
Frustration. I'm showing up now almost every single month at the school board meetings. I speak a lot of times, but I also listen. And at that point in time, there was a newspaper reporter, South County Times, that would come. I mean, not a lot of news going on. And so I remember I presented this information to the school about the failure rates, and that intrigued him. And so he contacted the school district for a comment. And then he sends me an email and said, they said your information's false and they don't know where you got it. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, they said that those failure rates are not accurate and they don't know where you got it. And
So they lied.
I said, give me your email. And so he gave me, and I forwarded the exact data from the Lindbergh School District to the reporter and said, here's the data they sent me. This is their data. You should wonder why no one there has read it or why they're lying about it. And so he did a piece on that exchange, and that the school district didn't know their own failure rates and they didn't know their own data and were willing to disparage me for showing the data that they didn't want anyone to see.
Did they really not know the data, or are they just flat out?
So there was a conversation that I had when we were discussing about why they weren't sharing the data with parents.
Yeah.
And mind you, we got data saying our kids passed.
Yeah.
And then when I got the actual
Yeah.
report, they failed. And I was
Yeah.
like, you sent out a mass email to everyone saying your kid had been screened and they passed. And I go, that's false.
I remember the data stuff in the IEP meetings was an absolute joke. And you would give me charts and say, okay, you're a stats guy. Okay, break this down for me. And I'm looking at this and you're like, here's what they're saying. And I'm like, that is so not true on what's indicative of the chart in the actual numbers here. Let me show you. And then they would put things in a graph to make it look like there was these huge jumps and this huge movement. And it was 1 point, not knowing that it was 2 standard deviations below what was expected at that grade level, because the top half of the chart they just would omit. It was stuff like that would drive me absolutely bonkers. And the data dump that they would do and try to twist the data absolutely infuriated me. And it had to.
Yeah, I mean, when I was having this conversation with the school district about why, one, you shared false data in a mass email to parents that their kids passed. And then I said, every parent should get the actual score. And I mean, keep in mind, your choices were high risk, some risk, or low risk. That's how it came out. And so I'm having a conversation with the administrator at the school district. It's dark, it's wintertime, I'm on my drive home from downtown, I'm stuck in traffic, and she goes, we are not going to send the data to the parents because that information would be overwhelming to the average parent. And I paused and I said, that might be the most condescending thing I have ever heard a school administrator say about a parent. Are you telling me that a parent doesn't understand the words high risk, some risk, or low risk? Because that's all I'm asking you to send them. And she goes, yes. And I go, you're concerned because more than 50% of all kids are some risk and more than 40% are high risk. You're not concerned about the parents. You're concerned about the reaction of the parents when they find out their kids aren't learning to read.
So, and this goes back to, the non-disclosure of the criers.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing that the school is now shielding us from actually knowing what's going on with our kids. And that seems like something, I mean, I know we can get into rabbit holes down here, but it seems to be pervasive in our society, not just with reading, there's a lot of other issues that seem to be happening in the school districts because of that. And I just don't understand that, because I always viewed, and we were always optimistic, that the school and the parents, it's a partnership. Here we are, moved our entire family and our kids, one of the primary reasons to come here to Missouri to ensure the importance of education, because we want to partner and we believe in the education system, because we believe that, hey, this is going to better society as a whole. Hell, we have laws and mandate taxes and bonds and all this money to the school district because we know that they're going to do what's right for our kids and help them become great citizens in the community. But that hasn't been our experience. That I look at it now, and this is my opinion, that is such a false narrative of what we're actually doing with schools, that it really does anger me, as many things do.
Yes. I mean, I think in part the school wanted to believe that the screener they chose wasn't accurate, or that it wasn't done accurately, or something else. Like, they wanted to think that this was a one-off. And so the screening required 3 times a year. So part of the argument they were making is, well, let us do it one more time before we tell parents, before we get anybody involved. And I mean, it wasn't a one-off. And everything you just said, like, I mean, jumping out, I think when a lot of parents besides parents of children with dyslexia, because our kids are the canaries in the coal mine. Like, They fail early, they fail hard, they fail, catastrophically early on. I think when a lot of parents realized what was going on with schools was COVID.
Yeah.
When everyone had a window into their kids' education,
That's
when they
true.
saw the packets coming home, when they heard some of the discussions,
They observed the Zooms.
when they observed the Zooms, when they had to help their kid. And all of a sudden, you have all these kids in middle and high school that can't write a paragraph.
Yeah.
And parents are like, what the heck? What the hell is going on here?
I re-
COVID was eye-opening across the country about what was going on in schools.
I remember it was either during COVID or slightly thereafter. We had a discussion with our oldest two, and we asked them flat out, how much time is wasted in a school day? In other words, if you could go to school and compact everything into a period of time, how much time would that be? We asked them separately, and each one had the same answer. They said 50%. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I mean, it's passing periods, it's lunch, it's every busy work, everyone sit and do your own stuff. The actual instruction is well less than 50% of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, to me, that was wide opening. And to your point, now this screening and everything, and maybe this is not the right time to bring it up, but I think there is this dovetail into the prison population and the prison pipeline. What's the study? I mean, I've heard this before, and I can't remember where the stat comes from, but the number of prison beds, when they look at that, is based off of literacy. Is that correct? Can you speak to that?
So I don't know that it's well-founded, okay? But
Okay.
what the research said, and I'm using the term research lightly because it is out there, but you can't find a source for it,
Got
okay?
it.
But what it says is that prisons plan their beds based on third grade literacy rate on a 10-year plan, because our third graders are 8. So 10 years from now, they're planning prison beds based on literacy rates. I don't know that there is actually like prison beds are being based on that, but statistically, pretty damn accurate.
Really?
I mean, our prisons are filled with individuals, and the studies that have been done in prisons is more than 55% of people in prisons have a learning disability, primarily reading.
Okay.
So we have a huge percentage of people that go to prison that are in that institution being paid by our tax dollars because our earlier institutions failed them.
Got it.
So it's out there that third grade reading levels predict prison beds, but I can't tell you that here's the source.
Here's the source. But there just seems to be a high statistical correlation
Yes.
To that. So now you're starting to get knee deep into going to school boards, talking to administrators. You are a vocal voice. And at that time, what did you do? Social media, this is pre-COVID, but did you start the Facebook group? You started a Facebook group, or you started some groups, whether it was Dyslexia Moms or what were you doing to create a community or coalition, or to even understand, how do I attack this elephant in the room? How do I eat the elephant?
I mean, like many things, I fell into it. Okay. When I showed up for that school board speech in November of 2017, It was a packed house. And there was cameras there and there was people recording, but it was because there was a whole debate going on about the sex ed curriculum that the school was doing. So there was all these, I'm going to call them rabid parents, because they were really pissed off on one side or the other. They either wanted this sex ed program or they wanted it out. And so there was a bunch of people there. They had cameras. Almost all the speeches were about the sex ed curriculum. And then little old me gets up and does a 3-minute speech on dyslexia. And one of the moms that was there recording on the sex ed topic videotaped me because, the cameras are up. And she contacted me and said, are you kidding? Like, are these really our literacy rates? Is this what's going on? And I was like, no. And she goes, well, I don't have a kid with this issue, but she goes, let me cut the video clip of just you. She goes, you don't want our mess on your issue. So let me give you your video clip. And she encouraged me to start a Facebook page, which I called Lindbergh Leaders in Literacy, not because we were the leaders in literacy, but I had a hope that with the right, direction that we would become that. And so that was one of the first posts.
What was our literacy rate at that time? Do you remember?
I mean, statewide, nationwide, about 50% of all kids can read on grade level.
And
Lindbergh was a little better. I mean, I think we were more like 60%. If you think about 44% of the kids failed a reading screen, the rest of them are on track.
So 56 to 60%, somewhere
Yeah.
in that range,
Yes.
was the literacy rate. But what strikes me, and I said this to you right from the get-go, was like, when the hell did 60% become an A? If I got a 60% on an exam, I failed. But somehow that seems to be the A standard for literacy across the country. And I can't comprehend that. That's not excellence to me.
Well, I mean, I will tell you, I went to a luncheon. There's an individual in Missouri who set up a foundation, and one of the things they did was they pulled all of the data from DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and made it readable and made what's called report cards for each district. Okay?
All right.
So they took all of this difficult to access, difficult to understand, but mandatory reported data into the state, and they made report cards.
Yeah.
And so they were doing this launch, and I went. It was over lunch hour, and the lady presents, here's what we did, and these are A schools, B, C, and she gets done, and she is like, "Any questions?" And I was like, I have one, and I think I was the first and probably the only one that asked a question, and I said, "I'm confused. The highest ranking districts in the state have about a 66% literacy rate. How come that's an A?"
Yeah.
I literally said that, and she, her whole body sighed, and she was like, "We had this debate." And she goes, "Here's the reality. 66 is the highest." She goes, "There are school districts in this state with a 0% literacy rate."
That's
So
unbelievable.
0
Zero.
to 66.
Zero. Not a single kid.
Not a
can
single kid
read.
is reading on grade level. So
How,
0
how
is...
does that even? Well, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So,
Finish up.
Anyway, 66 is the highest, 0 is the lowest. And she goes, "They can't all be D's and F's." So we decided that we would do a bell curve, a standard bell curve, and we would chop it up. And so the top schools are A's and then B's, C's, and D's. She goes, "Otherwise, every school district in the state by a traditional grading standard would be a D or F." And she goes, "How helpful would that be for parents?" And I laughed and go, "Be pretty damn helpful to
I
me."
think it would be pretty damn helpful for taxpayers as to what the hell my money is going for. I look at it that way. Let me ask this question, though. In all fairness, is 66% the standard because you will never get 80% or 85% or 90%? Can we have a 90% literacy rate in the United States?
Statistically, 95% of kids are capable of learning to read on grade level when taught appropriately with effective intervention.
So
all the
we're-
science says that. 95%
So
of all
we're
kids.
underperforming by almost 30%.
Well,
So if 66 is the top and 95% can read, that's 30%, 29% difference, almost a 30% difference. We're underperforming, and we're saying, you know what? That's good enough. That's what I'm hearing when I hear this kind of stuff.
and when you use a number like 30%, I'm not a numbers person. Math disability comes my way legitimately.
It's really
But-
50. We
but-
could do 50% better, almost 50% better, because that's really is the percentage.
But here's what that percentage doesn't say. For instance, when I did the data and said how many kids are failing, I didn't say, well, I might have said 44%, but I gave them numbers. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 346. Kindergartners and first graders aren't reading on grade level. And if you think of that nationally, how many millions of our children? I mean,
That's millions. That's one school district.
yeah.
In Missouri.
Yeah. Yes. So just like in Missouri, we have 115,000 kids just on IEPs, and that represents maybe 15% of the entire school age population.
That's 5.5 million if
Yeah.
you extrapolate
And
out for
so
50
if
states.
only 50% of all kids are learning to read, the 50% means nothing. Each kid means something. And that's where I see it, is every child we don't teach to read, we are losing tremendously. That child is losing, that family is losing. That child's going to become an adult,
Society
and
is
society's losing.
Because that child could be that much more productive by reading, which subsequently then allows them to do math better, allows them to become better at whatever they choose to do, and opens up broader options for them to do.
And I mean, people don't like to talk about this, but it creates systemic poverty in certain situations. When our kids weren't learning to read, we could make $30,000 at Churchill happen to try and get the curriculum.
How many of the 115,000 could do that?
Exactly. And what about the districts where it is a 0% literacy rate?
Yeah. I imagine those districts
So,
are in some difficult areas.
You're perpetuating poverty because you're not giving them an escape route. There's no way to escape from that poverty if they don't get an education, if they don't learn to read. What are their options? I mean, how many are going to become NBA players and get a contract or play for the NFL? There's not options out.
So you're out there, you're at the school board meetings, you're creating a Facebook page, you're creating awareness around this issue. How is it received within the school and within the community? How are you perceived?
Well, there's two answers to that.
Okay.
The parents of other children like ours flocked to me. And we made a community and we made a group and we advocated for each other and they felt like they had a voice. So the other parents of children with dyslexia, with reading problems, etc., came out of the woodwork for the first time and felt comfortable talking. The people who didn't have, and not even the parents, it was more of the educators and other things who thought I was questioning their competence, who thought I was questioning their ability. They became very terse.
Did they take it personally? Why did they become terse? Because I would think if someone brought to me, if I'm a school superintendent and my job is to ensure, well, I'm going to use your line because you've said this all along, until all kids can read. And you really believe that. That's a mantra of yours because you know it's possible. You know that we can get to the 95%. You're confident of that.
Yes.
So if I'm a superintendent, I'm saying, okay, I want my school to be the best. Why wouldn't I want my school to be the best? The relentless pursuit of perfection, the relentless pursuit of excellence. So how do I do this? Because excellence is judged in many different ways in a school setting, but I would think that the primary, this is me, the primary objective is on education. It's on the testing. It's on reading. Back to how kind of we grew up, and maybe this is passé, but math and English and history and civics and science, literature, all these things we should be excellent at because that's what we're paying for, or at least that's what I thought I was paying for. But you're telling me, and you're sitting here saying your experience was the opposite. They're putting up a stop sign. Why?
I'm not an educator. What credentials do I have to judge them? I'm not.
You are a doctorate. You have a PhD. You're an attorney with an inordinate amount of education. How come they couldn't listen to you? And didn't you have individuals in your group that were a medical doctor, that were a pharmacist, highly educated individuals?
Yeah, I had teachers in the group too, but they weren't apparently the right kind of educators. I don't know. The school doors are closed to parents in a lot of ways, and that includes criticizing curriculum, criticizing methodology, criticizing growth within the school, because we're not in the classroom. We are not classroom teachers. We don't know what it's like, Nick. We don't know what it's like. The number of times that I heard, you don't know what it's like in a classroom, whatever. But I can read research.
Yes.
I can read studies on what does work. I can read about the neurological development of reading and its pathways and how it happens and the scope and sequence that it must occur in. And I can provide all of that to them. But there's a huge disconnect. And I mean, I blame a lot of it, and we haven't really gotten into Lucy Calkins and the whole cult of balanced literacy. But there is a pervasive belief that you can love a kid to literature, that you can love a kid to literacy, that if you just read to them, if you make a just right book and a just right nook with the right comfy chair and you expose them enough, kids are going to learn to read. And here's the problem with that. 60% of kids do learn to read that way.
Sure.
So I learned to read with nobody teaching me.
Yeah.
And 60% of kids are going to learn to read. So teachers feel successful with the belief that the right environment and a lot of love and a lot of, literacy teaches kids to read. And they take credit for the 60% that we're going to learn to read with mere exposure.
Regardless of what
Correct.
the system is or what was taught.
Yes.
It's the 40% that we're leaving behind and the other 60% included that benefit from a certain type of structured literacy. Is that correct?
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say and maybe this is a bad analogy, but to me, it's like cancer doctors taking credit for all the people who didn't get cancer. They're cured. Like I cured them. Like they're fine. I didn't even have to do anything.
Yeah.
And then you look at the ones with the cancer and the failure rate.
So we've taken a bunch of time today. There are so many other issues that we need to discuss, so many other details of the story. But I want to kind of wrap it up today and leave it for yet another podcast where we're going to discuss some finer points, the cases that you have, and the details that are so important along this journey to get kids to that 95% literacy rate that we know is possible here in the United States.
And I look forward to additional conversations because this may be our story, but this is a story of millions of children and families around the country.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.